Growing up at the Seder, it was always a sign of toughness to see how much of the horseradish, of the real horseradish, you were able to handle for Maror. Does your face become red? You start tearing up. But the halacha tells us the actual most ideal thing to use for Maror is romaine lettuce. Even though the Gemara gives us an option of 5 different things you're allowed to use for Maror, the number one thing on the list, the best, most lichatchila thing to use is romaine lettuce. And the question is, why? Wouldn't we think Maror, which is commemorating all of the back-breaking labor and the difficult times, the avodas perach, just the terrible things that were happening in Mitzrayim, wouldn't we think that horseradish, which is much more bitter, would be more appropriate than romaine lettuce, which is pretty sweet? How do I know that romaine lettuce is sweet? Because people voluntarily eat that in their salads all the time. So why would it be that we use romaine lettuce and that is the most ideal way of performing the mitzvah? Comes the Chacham Tzvi, a 17th century Chacham, and he explains something absolutely beautiful. He says that we have to understand what romaine lettuce is, and we'll recognize how this is actually the most perfect description of our slavery in Mitzrayim. Because yes, our romaine lettuce is sweet, and yes, it's good to eat. But that's because we pluck it when it's very young, very early on in the process. If we were to leave it for a little bit longer, it would become tremendously bitter. Comes the Chacham Tzvi and says that was our experience in Mitzrayim as well. In Mitzrayim, it didn't just go from 0 to 60 right away. It was a gradual process that turned us into slaves. It started out maybe restricting us here, and then restricting us a little bit more, and then a little bit more restriction, until ultimately we were found to be slaves. The Mefarshim point out that avodas perach comes from perach, soft tongue, because Paro would sweet talk the Jewish people, and it was kind of subtle the way it turned from being the Jews as members of society to becoming the slaves in that society. And it wasn't so obvious. It happened over time. You know, there's an experiment that they do with, I hope they're not doing it, but there's an experiment that they found with frogs, that if you put a frog in boiling water, it will jump right out and nothing will happen. But if you put the frog in lukewarm water and then you turn it hotter and hotter and hotter, the frog will cook. Because oftentimes, as the temperature is continuing to get higher and higher, we get used to things and we start to move our red lines and we start to get ourselves accustomed to certain things when ultimately things might be moving in a bad direction. And the truth is that this is what happens with the Yetzer Hara as well. If you ask us, would we ever do such a terrible thing? Oh my gosh, I would never go all the way over there. That's going to be horrible. But slowly and slowly and slowly, the Yetzer Hara eats at us one step at a time to get us to where it wants us to be going. And our job is to say, no, that's not going to work. And what the Maror represents is exactly the slavery in Mitzrayim. It starts out as sweet, it starts out all nice, maybe some nice words here, some nice words there, with only a little bit of bitterness, and then it's a little more, and then it's a little more, until ultimately you have the Maror. Our job is to remember how we have to stop it early. We think what was happening in the 30s in Germany, you would never think, if it just happened right away, oh my gosh, they're going to kill all the steps. It happens gradually, but it's on us to go and be able to stop this, to recognize things for what they are, to call them out for what they are, and to ultimately turn the Maror and to turn all of the backbreaking labor and to turn all the slavery into our ultimate geula. We fight against the Yetzer Hara, we fight against all our enemies, and Amir Tashem, we should be zocha to an amazing geula b'mheira b'yameinu.